Hey, salut friends. Today we are tackling a topic that I have not done on this channel, and that is vintage fragrances. Now the main reason is because I am not a vintage fragrance collector or aficionado by any means, due to many reasons such as tastes, access, pricing and such. There are people who exclusively collect and wear vintages, some for the bottles or just as a record, and I am totally happy for them. My tastes lean more contemporary. Plus, I like to be able to go and test something and buy it if I end up really liking it. Then we have the cost. I think vintage prices have just gone through the roof in the last 5 to 10 years. It has become a business in certain regards. More and more newer brands are seeing that and releasing limited editions, exclusives, investment fragrances and such, which then morphs from being an enjoyable hobby to feeding the FOMO, chasing, spending thousands, getting into debt, influencer culture, flex culture, and other consequences. Not to mention, there's a lot of risks and challenges associated with even finding and buying vintage fragrances in good shape. It's just something that I have come to peace with. All that to say, I do have and enjoy some vintage fragrances, mainly older versions of fragrances that are available today, which I happen to like, and then made me get the older versions. I also only buy them at prices that I'm convinced by. With all that being said, let's look at them one by one in no particular order. I have actually 18 here, so I'll try to be short and not get into review mode. First is Eau Sauvage. This comes in a flat flask-like bottle now. Here I have one possibly from the 80s or early 90s. Obviously it is an iconic aromatic masculine fragrance composed by Edmund Runitska. Very fresh and lemony with lots of herbs, spices and florals, particularly known for its use of hedione, drying down to this woody, mossy base. It can be seen as a competition to Chanel's Pour Monsieur in some ways, signature scent of many important men, be it royals, artists, including perfumers, who consider it to be influential. It is still in decent shape, only this one is more mossy and darker, almost going in the cheaper direction. Classic for a reason. The parfum version is also amazing. This is Dior Fahrenheit from 2009. I used to have the vintage flat cap version. I liked smelling it, but there was something in it that was a bit nauseating for me while actually wearing it. Wasn't challenging because I'm used to more potent smells. This could be the ozonic violet or the white floral undertone from the jasmine or lily of the valley, not sure. But this version works just fine for me. This rugged petrol leather classic. Who would have thought of putting flaming volatility in a bottle? Yet Dior did and also succeeded. I also have the parfum version that I enjoy. Next is Dior Homme Eau de Toilette. This is supposed to be the 2010 version, initially composed by Olivier Polge and then reformulated by François Demachy. Please, Francis Coupejean, do not touch the original, cause the 2020 version called Dior Homme Original is still pretty good. I don't have the much loved Silver Stem edition, but the change to black stem happened in 2010. So is this the real vintage formula with the black stem bottle? Who knows? Because the box with C and D is definitely from 2010. Anyway, we have all been told how this smells, more so based on Dior Homme Intense, which became arguably more popular. Iris, cacao, leather and ambrette. However, the main aspect or difference I see here is that this has a much more prominent aromatic fougere element at the heart. The lavender, tonka, coumarin, vetiver are more evident than the latest version, which is more so powdery and musky. Dior Homme Intense, of course, goes full-on makeup lipstick mode. This was so influential that Eddie Sleman did 12 spin-offs at an expensive price bracket at Celine. You can see how the idea of a men's fragrance changes within Dior, from Eau Sauvage to Fahrenheit to this. Easily an all-time favorite. Next after Dior, let's go Hermes. This is Bel Ami by Jean-Louis Vuitton, the middle version after the shaker and before the capped version, probably from the mid to early 2000s, reformulated by Jean-Claude Ellena. One of the many signature leather fragrances from Hermes. Of course, this is nothing like the handbag leathers like Dobli, Valinka or Barenia that has become the house signature in the last 20 years. This is a more rugged, woody, spicy, aromatic, smoky leather. I have smelled the shaker version and it's just very much black tar-like, so I prefer this one. Next is Equipage from Hermès, released in 1970. Mossy, herbal, agrestic, woody fragrance by Guy Robert. This is honestly a bit too much for me, too classic. Something depressing about it because of the florals and herbs and moss. I don't fit this fragrance that much either. It's really like the smell of a grandpa looking for mushrooms in the garden kind of smell, which I really have to be in the mood for. Don't feel like spraying it all the time. I much prefer Equipage Geranium by Lena. 6 is Rocabar from 1998. Comes with this striped jute cover. This is a bit of an odd one in that it feels neither classic nor modern. Does not align with the style of other Hermes fragrances at all. A dry, spicy, woody scent with lots of cedar, juniper, cypress and patchouli, creating this striped suit-wearing gentleman vibe. Does have that coniferous, foresty smell, smoothed out by the cedar, patchouli and resins. It gets criticized a lot for being generic, and I can certainly see why. Still a nicely done woody scent. Let's get a couple of one-offs out of the way. This is Ambre Sultan from Serge Lutens, composed by Christopher Sheldrake, the Palais Royal version. Not quite the Shiseido version from 1993, which is exactly the same age as I am. This is a full-on oriental, resinous, spicy, balsamic, traditional amber, a reference one at that. Lots of coriander, rocky myrrh, smoky labdanum and dry dusty sandalwood with the patchouli in the base. Any amber comes out till today gets compared to this, and deservedly so. 8 is Balenciaga pour Homme from 1990, composed by Gerard Anthony. One of the best monolithic masculine fragrances from that era. What I find impressive with this is that it takes the butch, rich, dense components which most fragrances from the time did in a muddled manner. And yes, there are many, only the good ones are talked about and the rest have been forgotten. So it takes the patchouli, honey, oak moss and spices like cinnamon and has integrated them in the best manner possible. It's almost like a very precise, timely snapshot of those dynamic elements of this kind of scent profile, done at the right moment and with the right balance, elevating it higher than those other fragrances. It's so rich, dense and decadent, surprisingly smooth and stable after hours, when usually most fragrances dry out after an hour or two these days. It is also not too serious and depressing like some of its counterparts. The sweetness, this medicinal cypress aspects, contrasted by the warm sandalwood, and this soapy, fruity, almost jammy undertone adds this playful vibe, sort of going with this marble effect of the scent. It allegedly has some oud, according to Michael Edwards. It's got this sense of charm that I find in very few masculine fragrances. Let's look at some Guerlain fragrances next. This is Shalimar Parfum de Toilette. Needs no introduction. The legendary, now close to a centenary, amber perfume, the flagship creation of Guerlain. Another one that has been kept in good shape by Thierry Vasser even recently. Of course, you have the humongous bergamot in the opening with the Guerlainard floral heart, which dries down to this astonishingly wonderful growling amber. Only in this version, it feels more smoky, leathery and somewhat animalic. Countless flankers can be made, but I keep coming back to the original. 10 is Samsara Eau de Parfum. This is the original version from the early 90s, composed by Jean-Paul Guerlain. This is a floral sandalwood perfume. This is said to contain a lot of Mysore sandalwood oil before it became highly regulated. The current version uses Australian sandalwood, I think. There is this creamy, coconutty, rich sandalwood balanced by a dominant jasmine, which is being repeated even today. Some fleshy ylang giving this voluptuousness to the sandalwood. Seems to take inspiration from Bois des Îles. The Guerlainard heart is also present with a dominant tonka. Just an absolutely divine sandalwood fragrance. At number 11 is Heritage EDT. This is easily my most favorite masculine creation from Guerlain, apart from the one that's coming up next. I have these old pendulum style bottles from the 90s. The smell itself is something at the crossroads of an aromatic fougere and a woody spicy. Lots of lavender, geranium, bergamot, petitgrain, and spiciness from the pepper and coriander, forming the aromatic side, softened by the florals. And then there is this big presence of patchouli and sandalwood, which takes over in the dry down. It is just a superb, woody, hitting at a barbershop style, kind of classy, masculine scent. Next is Derby by Jean-Paul Guerlain. This is the chest plate or eagle bottle version. I also own the Les Parisiennes wooden bottle. This is possibly one of the two best leather chypre that I have come across, and I do prefer this over Mitsuko. Lots of lemon, nutmeg, and this bright mint note offsetting the darker aspects to come, and they do come through. This smooth, worked in saddle kind of leather with lots of patchouli, moss, and sandalwood, made when traditional perfume still had a personal touch. Vasseur did a good job by balancing the modern version with carnation, birch, and patchouli and adding more fougere elements. It's one of those cases where everything comes together really well, like the technicians in a movie giving their best, or all the musicians in an orchestra reaching their peak. This is when Guerlain was still at their best, which is being Guerlain. Let's finish off with some Chanel fragrances. This is number 19 EDT Splash version, easily the most renowned green fragrance, one of my all-time favorites. I prefer this over number 5. The current version is still very nice. Green galbanum, floral, musky, yet cold from notes like iris and hyacinth. Fantastic, sharp cheeks, tall shoulders, and don't look down kind of vibe. Works great in the heat, especially in spring. The main difference I see here could be that this is less floral and much more earthy and mossy, chypre-like. Even the galbanum is bitter, sappy, and kind of resinous, still balancing the vibrancy. Surely the galbanum and oak moss restrictions must have played a part in reformulations, but when it comes to Chanel, in spite of differences, I have been content, including this one. They do seem to take care of their fragrances, which is why a lot of my vintage fragrances are from them, including the oldest one coming up soon. Next are Chanel number 5 EDT and EDC splash bottles, originally made by Ernest Beau. Number 5 of course needs no introduction, the quintessential aldehydic floral perfume, still being very abstract with its allure. These versions are more woody than the Parfum and EDP, which have more of the blinding aldehydes. The Chanel floral bouquet at its heart, iris, rose, jasmine, ylang. The cologne version is of course fresher and orange blossom heavy. These vintage versions are more endolic, sweaty, musky, voluptuous and glamorous, rather animalic in comparison to current formulations from the civet and old musks. They just wonderfully encapsulate the sophistication, femininity and luxury of a couture brand. Next is Bois des Îles, which I also have a modern bottle of. I intentionally bring it up here because of its connection with number 5. Of course, the similarities have already been talked about, but I find the gap to be even smaller with the EDT versions of both these fragrances. Side by side, on a quick glance, they may even smell the same. Then in the dry down, the differences become more evident. The aldehydes and white florals are toned down, the ylang, sandalwood and the spicy aspects are highlighted, becoming Bois des Îles. Another reference floral sandalwood perfume, which I think inspired Samsara, which in turn is being referenced till today. Speaking of Bois des Îles, let's see what is considered to be its masculine version with Egoist Splash. This spicy, ambre, woody fragrance supported by this musky ambrette, dry tobacco and rose. Another suave, sophisticated scent, going for this semi-casual, camel jacket wearing gentleman, going about his afternoon during the fall kind of image. The current version is less sandalwoody and more musky, still works for what the fragrance tries to do. Next is Antaeus Splash from the 80s, composed by Jacques Polge, Brute with a Heart. This is a leathery chypre, mainly because of this dark, balmy castoreum and the moss patchouli combo in the base. A big dark rose and jasmine bringing in the softer aspects. This gothic black lacquered finish is so mysterious and sensual. It's kind of coming back strong now, it feels like. I know some designers wear it. Young models, women wear it when they are doing an all black look. Only Chanel can make such a beastly fragrance come across like it's vulnerable. It's so intricate and well calibrated that it has become an accessory beyond scent. And at last is Cuir de Russie Extrait de Parfum, possibly from the 60s because of this flat, thin stopper. This is hands down my favorite leather fragrance. The luminous Chanel florals, Endolic jasmine, the carnal ylang, rose, and notably the orange blossom, working with the aldehydes, washing upon the darker elements of smoky birch tar, tobacco, and leather, is simply magical. It's just pinnacle of luxury, opulence in perfume form. One of the best things that I have ever smelled. So that's the actual list. Other than this, I do have some 2000 stuff like some Chanel exclusive EDTs and some designer fragrances, and not to mention discontinued ones, which could be a separate video. But for now, those have been my favorite vintage fragrances. Again, I'm not a vintage purist, so hope I was able to showcase the ones that matter to me personally. Anyway, thanks for watching, take care and ciao.